Hi, and thank you for clicking on this video. Recently I've been watching some older videos on YouTube of people doing various gaming challenges, things like trying to beat Donkey Kong Country without defeating any enemies, trying to beat Sonic by only moving Sonic with tails, etc. After watching some videos of that style and after completing my second playthrough of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I had asked myself the question, can you beat this game without killing any enemies? Let me explain a bit because it's not as cut and dry as it sounds. First of all, this game has a lot of bosses, several of which are optional and give you bonus rewards like experience points, health upgrades, and equipment. These bosses will not be exempt from this challenge. I am only going to fight the bosses that are strictly required to be beaten in order to progress. Secondly, in case you don't know, this game has some RPG elements, namely stats that determine things like your attack and defense. You can, of course, boost these stats by using various pieces of equipment you find throughout the game. However, a lot of this equipment, as well as experience, is dropped by defeated enemies. Not only am I going to be missing out on the XP and items enemies drop, but like I alluded to a moment ago, I'm also going to be missing the XP and health boost that you would get from all the game's optional bosses. As such, basically the only gear I'll get to make do with are items hidden in various walls and such throughout the game, as well as a few health upgrades dropped by the required bosses. To be fair, there's a generous amount of them and they're all pretty nice to have even in a normal playthrough, but basically what I'm saying is this. I am going to be playing through the game with nearly the bare minimum health, attack, and defense, in a game where enemies continue to get stronger the further in you get. Yikes. One more thing. I'm aiming to get one of the good endings, so my goal is to get to the heart of the inverted castle and defeat the true final boss, Dracula. If I only make it as far as the Richter fight in the main castle, though, well, I guess I wouldn't be a total failure. But anyway, I've rambled on enough. Finally, with all of that out of the way, it's time to see if I can beat Castlevania Symphony of the Night without killing any enemies.
Dracula's castle beckons for you, and no man can say who will emerge victorious.
Also, this game uses the final battle of the previous game, Rondo of Blood, as a prologue, but I'm going to skip this because the only enemy here is Dracula, who must be defeated to get started with the main game. We're going to fast forward past this and go to the castle entrance where we gain control of Alucard, the main character of Symphony of the Night. Here we go. The intro here might be, unsurprisingly, the easiest part of this run. You start off with some of the strongest equipment in the game, including the complete Alucard set. With this gear in hand, you can easily jump over and damage boost through enemies past the first couple rooms. Yes, I know you can't truly damage boost in this game because the invincibility frames are just too brief, but I'm using the term anyway for simplification. Don't forget to grab the turkey hidden in the stairs here too. I have a feeling it'll help later. After that, we come face to face with Death, Dracula's right-hand man, or as the in-game enemy list funnily puts it, Dracula's close friend. Anyway, Death steals all of our equipment, save the turkey, and this is where the challenge really begins. Pressing forward and up some stairs, we come closer to our first save room, but the skeleton at the bottom of this room greatly concerned me at first. He doesn't move far enough down this hallway in either direction for us to get past him without taking damage. Adding to that, when Alucard gets hit, he gets knocked back a lot, and he doesn't have nearly enough invincibility frames to simply walk through. Just when I thought I would actually have to kill this skeleton, I had an idea. Ha! You can dodge into an enemy at just the right time and damage boost through them. This technique is sure to be invaluable to this challenge, and from here on I'll be calling it dodge boosting. Anyway, here's our first save room. They're plentiful around the castle, and not only do they let you save your game, but they also fully restore your health and magic. These rooms will be an immense help to this challenge. Ascending this room and going west, we arrive at the alchemy lab, and I have to talk about these guys already. These red fellas are called blood skeletons, and there are palette swaps of them too. Once you hit them, they fall apart on the floor, but they don't die, they reassemble after a few seconds. They don't grant any XP for hitting them either, so does incapacitating them like this still count as killing them? I'm gonna say no. Also, in this room with the first blood skeleton, I acquired a piece of armor, but as you see, I didn't immediately equip it. Not sure why, but as you'll see shortly, this was a big mistake. Up ahead, there's a breakable wall here that hides a max heart increase, which is never a bad thing. I also break the science equipment to get the first shield item. This is immensely useful, as shields block most projectiles, so I equipped this along with the armor I forgot to put on earlier. In my haste to ascend the platforms in this room, the skeleton here hit me from below, and I died. For some reason I neglected to save a clip of this, but anyway, this setback returns me to the first save room, so I'm gonna fast forward back to where we left off. Here we are again in the room before the skeleton, and as you can see, my XP is still at 0 and my level is at 1. Not messing around with the skeleton this time, I simply go up the platforms here without issue. I'm ignoring the breakable science stuff next to that skeleton because in my previous attempt I found it was just a consumable item. In this next room we see some spittle bones which drip acidic saliva when the player stands below them. We also see some axe knights which aren't too hard to avoid here despite me taking a hit from one. It's just about waiting for the right moment in between their throws. Moving on, this shaft has some more spittle bones, which are easy to avoid since they're the only enemies here. We also have a second save room here, which I happily use to restore my health and overwrite my save data. I hit the torch at the top of the shaft to collect the axe sub-weapon it drops. Yes, I realize I haven't talked about the sub-weapons. No, I'm not going to, they're very self-explanatory. At the top of this shaft, we come to the first boss fight, Slagra and Gaibon. 2 bosses at once while I have less equipment than is ideal. How well do I fare here? Well enough, actually. This fight isn't too difficult. Sure, I jumped into Slugra's spear by accident, but these two have very predictable attacks, and Alucard has great mobility. I do recall the fight being more annoying if you take out Gaibon, the flying one, first, because then you have to deal with Slugra's more aggressive and melee attacks. Also, Gaibon's fireballs can all be blocked with the shield. Regardless, it's an easy fight. I guess now is also a good time to mention that Alucard has some magic he can use. Alucard doesn't need to get his spells by collecting items or leveling up as you might expect. Any spell can be performed at any time provided you know the right button combination, because these spells are all cast with various D-pad inputs and such. His strongest spell is Soul Steal, which hits all enemies on screen several times and drains their health to restore Alucard's, but it consumes a lot of mana. I didn't use any magic in this fight because at the moment Alucard doesn't have enough MP to cast Soul Steal, but it turns out that even when unarmed, this fight was a walk in the park. Anyway, time to press on. This hallway immediately forward concerned me at first, since the ceiling is too low to jump over the skeletons, but by dodge boosting, you can get through. Down this hallway, we come to an elevator. On the next floor down, we come to a room that gives us some sunglasses which lower intelligence, the magic stat, but boost defense, and I equip them because for this challenge I need defense. The floor after this one has a cannon that makes a path back through the lab for us and also grants us a short sword, which Alucard wields more like a dagger and strikes about as fast as punching. I equip it and take the elevator back up to the top. The room up this shaft is another save room, hooray! Above is another corridor with enemies that must be damage boosted or dodge boosted through because low ceilings. It was tricky, and I took a lot of damage, but I made it. This next room has Axe Knights who, thankfully, only do 1 damage on contact, though I did get hit a lot. Their axes also do 3 damage, and the shield cannot block those. As I left the room, I heard spittle bones above, but didn't stick around long enough to see them. Going through this door and this corridor leads to a new area, the Marble Gallery. And finally, a ceiling that's high enough to allow jumping over enemies again. Whoa, nearly killed those Ouija tables. Yikes, that was close. Just before it is a save room that I hesitate to use because I wasn't sure if I'd be forced to kill the Ouija table when leaving. Sure enough, I get over it, but I don't feel the immediate urge to save. Is this a bad move? Maybe, we'll see. I go above and enter the Room of Clocks. Just some flea men in here. They would have been a nightmare to dodge in older Castlevania games, but here they're fine. We come to the clock room at the heart of the castle and meet Maria Renard. But it's a brief meeting, and nothing really happens, so we return to gameplay. Over here, the other end of the Room of Clocks, a flea man, and beyond that, more tables and various skeletons. The skeleton duo up here annoyed me a bit, but I lured the boomerang one away and jumped over him. I took more damage than I really needed to against these other skellies, but I was feeling impatient for whatever reason. That's a bad thing in this challenge, because rushing means death. Uh-oh, these Diplocephalus enemies concerned me too at first, but then I learned you could jump up on the monster part's back to then jump over the lady. My health was looking pretty low, and I didn't save earlier as you saw, so I drank the potion here to hold me over. More of these monsters in here, but also... oh god, these things. Stone roses. Yet another monster that worried me, but is avoidable thanks to damage boosting at just the right time. I made it to the next area, the outer wall, but I'd still taken a lot of damage. I wasn't feeling too confident about up ahead since I knew there was another boss coming up. But I also knew a save room was close. Could I survive until then? I peeked ahead here and saw some Axe Knight pallet swaps. I knew I could jump over them, but I just didn't want to chance it, so I drank another potion here just to be safe. I felt comfortable with this because this game has a merchant we can buy things from, but more on that later. I advanced and got over the Axe Knights, and of course, here's the next save room. Was the potion wasted? Sure, but I don't care. And here's the next boss, Doppelganger. He wasn't as difficult as I was afraid he might be. I kinda just spammed melee. Speaking of melee, immediately after is a free sword, but I like my current one because it's fast, so I don't swap to it. I also returned to the save room so I could take a break and edit the footage I got this far. It took me a long time to get around to the video editing process, because I took a lot of individual clips while playing the game and writing the script at the same time, but when I finally did, I realized while reading the script for the commentary that I was cutting out a lot of gameplay footage so that I would better sync with the reading of the script, which I didn't feel like editing at that point. This was a double-edged sword. On one hand, I knew the video would be long enough as it is, and I knew I could always point to the pause menu's kill counter as proof that I've only been killing the required bosses. But on the other hand, there were huge chunks of footage and lots of enemies in each room that I was completely glossing over just to sync up the talkie bits better. I know that I can't document every single enemy in the game, because then we'd be here even longer, but I just wasn't happy with how much I had to cut out, and I wanted to have some nice, smooth, uninterrupted gameplay footage. It's still a ways off, but once we get to a certain area in the game which has one of my favorite songs, I'm just going to stop talking for a bit and let the gameplay footage speak for itself. In case you'd like to skip those bits and just jump to the commentary, I'll be putting timestamps on screen when we get to those bits. Anyway, once I got back to the game for Session 2, just outside of the Doppelganger arena I found a life max up, but I fell back down by mistake, so I jump over the Axe Knights again and decide to overwrite my save data since I'm right outside of the save room. Skipping ahead back to where I got the life increase, I head up this long tower of the outer wall, which was filled to the brim with enemies, several of which were pretty difficult to get past. Remember how I said Alucard has great mobility? Well, in this area, most of these platforms for ascending have been placed so that Alucard can only reach them if he's standing at the highest point of the preceding platform, that being where all the enemies used to stand on each row. And why they decided to put so many musket skeletons here is a mystery to me. They nearly killed me. I'm surprised I made it out of there at all. And oh my god, Medusa heads too! With such low health, they scared the crap out of me. I kept climbing and climbing because I knew there was a save point up here and I wanted to use it desperately. Thankfully, I did make it there, healed up, and saved the game. The area adjacent to the save room is the clock tower, and if memory serves, and if I have my course plotted correctly, the boss of the clock tower is technically optional, and I don't have to go through the area at all to beat the game. So I turn back and head back down the way I came to unlock the elevator, and I break this pottery to get a heart increase. I continue down, use this fast travel room, get another heart increase, and open a path between the fast travel and the first area of Dracula's castle. I then turn around again, go back to the outer wall, continue downwards, and get the Soul of Wolf, Alucard's first transformation power. I keep going and head to the next area I knew I had to go, the Long Library. The first enemies encountered here are these fencer skeletons who strafe a bit before doing a sword thrust. I found the technique for dodging them is to wait until they're about to strike and then jump over them. Sure to be difficult around multiple enemies, but works in theory. I dodge the library, including these souls, spellbooks, and corpse weeds. The books gave you ample time to move past them despite there being so many of them. Up ahead, we come to the Master Librarian, the merchant I mentioned earlier. He has many things for sale, not least of which is the Jewel of Open, which is an item that's required for progressing through the game. As you can see in the footage, I don't have the money for it, so I farm the torch in the previous room, which dropped $25 worth of cash. I break it, reset the room, and break it again, over and over until I have the money I need for the Jewel of Open, and I buy it. I also considered farming enough cash to buy at least one potion, and sure enough, I caved and did just that. I worried about the impact this could have on the game's time limit, but shrugged it off easily because the time limit is pretty lenient. Well, under normal circumstances anyway. I knew I couldn't head deep into the library without the double jump ability, but I tried going deeper just to see what was up ahead, and it was just the very scroll. Not worth it at all for this challenge. And then I got ganged up on by a bunch of spellbooks, couldn't escape, and died. So I go and repeat everything that I had just done. Activated the elevator, collected the heart increases, used the fast travel once and opened the path between it and the first area of the game, went back to the Master Librarian, farmed the money until I could afford the Jewel of Open and a potion. Once I got what I needed, I went back down to the save room from before the doppelganger fight, with the next objective being to head west from the alchemy lab beyond the previously locked door. Thanks to the fast travel room in the outer wall, backtracking is a breeze. I'm skipping ahead there because there aren't any new enemies or anything like that. It's exactly the same castle as it was before. I realized that I had mentioned a previously locked door, but I didn't show the locked door on my first trip through the area. That's because the layout of the castle was still fresh in my mind from my previous playthrough of the game, and I knew I couldn't go this way without the Jewel of Open. Anyway, we bump into Maria again, and pretty much just like the first time, nothing really happens, other than that Alucard explains to Maria that the castle itself is a creature of chaos and changes its shape and layout every time it rises. But this run isn't meant to focus on the plot, so we press on into the next area, the Royal Chapel. Once I arrived there, I recalled that the first part of the area is essentially just a really long stairway, and just as I remembered what enemies were in this area. Oh shit, how the heck am I gonna get over these guys? Once again, I'm confronted with the very scary thought that this challenge may really be impossible. In this moment, I took a break to consider if there was any other way whatsoever that I could get to the next required boss and the double jump ability. I figured there was no chance of first getting the Leap Stone, which is the relic that grants double jumping, because if I recall, that's further in the Royal Chapel, or even past it, right in the next area. And I figured taking the clock tower to get there was out of the question too. That area is full of flying Medusa heads and harpies. That would be a nightmare to navigate without killing. Not to mention, once again, the boss of the clock tower is optional and does not have to be killed to win the game. I then recalled one of the game's many relics, the gravity boots. By pressing down and then up, Alucard can do a high jump and spring to the ceiling. I looked up where to find those, and unfortunately, they require the bat transformation power to get, so there goes any chance of those helping with this. I persisted in my attempts at dodge boosting and damage boosting, and holy shit, I did it. That doesn't mean this is any easier, though. There are still lots of enemies here that'll be painful to get by, including even more skeleton statues. And I died. At least I know this may technically be possible, though. I reviewed my footage of how exactly I got by the skeleton statue and tried to replicate it. It was surprisingly easy, although I didn't like the hefty chunk of health it removes. But again, it's doable. So I tried again, and again, and finally, at the cost of my one potion, I made it up the stairs. In my haste to speed past and through this sword enemy, I took a lot of damage that was absolutely my own fault. I thought I recalled from my last playthrough that there were frames of its first animations where you could go through it unharmed, but I was very mistaken. I peeked forward at the top of these stairs, saw the boomerang skeletons, and said, screw this. I went back down and to the right and hit a dead end from the Colosseum, but got a shield. Yay. At this point I just wanted another save room because I didn't want to consume my only other healing item. I was afraid to progress further after that damage I took from the sword enemy. I'm such an idiot. In the end, I regrettably used the turkey because I did not want to traverse the stairs again under any circumstances, even with the knowledge that I could do this again with less damage taken. I went further up this tower of the chapel, past the boomerang skeletons with ease, and after finding this room with the life increase, I just couldn't stand having used the turkey. So I quit to the menu and attempted a better go of the stairs and that sword enemy. And this time I did much better, only needing to use the potion as a result of hitting the sword. I got the shield from the Colosseum too. Went back up to get that life increase, found a nice chest plate that sharply boosted my defense, looked around for a save room only to find dead ends. Oh yeah, and died again in this stupid hallway full of bats and polearm skeletons. Great. On my next attempt, they were once again the death of me. You have no idea how tempting it was to kill all the enemies in this hallway, and even when I tried to use a potion part way through, I didn't have enough time for the healing to start. The skeletons ganged up on me. I was starting to wonder once again if I would have to kill them. I knew for certain anyway that this was the only path forward, so I worried I would need to try killing at least one of them. But somehow, by some miracle, without needing to kill anything, I made it to the next boss, the Hippogriff. I feared I would need the turkey to survive this, and it turns out I did, but the fight really wasn't that bad. The boss didn't really have any difficult or complex attacks, and after realizing the turkey does just 80 HP, I didn't feel so bad about using it. Sure, it's basically instantaneous healing, and 80 is a lot, but that's just 30 more than a potion, and I can farm the cash for those later. I'm not upset. After that fight, another encounter with Maria, where she says she's looking for Richter Belmont in Alucard agrees to tell her his whereabouts if we find him. Pressing ahead, I was certain that the next save room was right around the corner, and... You've got to be fucking kidding me. Another one of these copy-pasted hallways with enemy spam. I can't believe this shit. And I died again. I was so sick of doing the same long segment over and over and over. Up the stairs, past the sword, get the shield, up the tower, life increased, new chest plate, down the hallways, fight the Hippogriff. I wish that I was doing this on an emulator so that I could abuse save states for this part. But the way I get footage and make videos right now is on the PS4, so I'm stuck playing this legitimately, and you have no idea how painful that's getting right about now. Even with the knowledge that I basically failed the challenge the instant I kill a non-required enemy, I still wanted so bad to murder these stupid polearm skeletons. And the bat spam made it so much worse. I had at least by this point figured out how to get by the skeletons with minimal damage. You can duck underneath their thrusting attack, and if you bump into them when they wind up for it without touching the spear, you get knocked through them and only take 2 damage. So that was my tack here. Patiently close the distance, damage boost during the wind-up. Round 2 with the Hippogriff went much better, and I didn't have to use the turkey or the potion. And I knew how to handle the adjacent hallway now, so I tried again. And with patience and caution, I got through. And my reward for this was an earned and glorious save room. Thank goodness. I went up this tower and found another potion and a cutlass, and even though I love the dagger to death for its lightweight and ease of use, I decided to try the cutlass since it provided what appeared to be a not insignificant stat boost. Heading to the right, we enter the next area, which doesn't immediately identify itself, but this is near the castle pinnacle, near the throne room at the highest tower. We have some axe knights here which thankfully can be damage boosted through at just the right moment when they wind up for an attack. And now that I'm thinking about it, my so-called dodge boosting really was just a fancy damage boosting, and at the time I first pulled it off at the start of the game, I didn't know what made it tick. But now that I've had enough practice damage boosting, I can see that it usually happens when enemies perform attacks that shift their hitbox slightly behind themselves to knock you in that direction. For example, when the axe knights pull their arm back before throwing. I still don't understand why the damage boosting against the skeleton statues in the Royal Chapel worked, but I'd guess I was just barely standing on the right side of their flame breath's hitbox as well. So, my quote-unquote dodge boosting wasn't anything special, and the dodge maneuver had nothing to do with it at all, besides in some cases maybe allowing you to react to the change in hitbox more quickly. Anyway, as you saw past the hallway of Axe Knights, the area finally states its name, the Castle Keep, and right here is another fast travel room, yay! I head up the lift here and to the left because I know that's where the leap stone is, and oh my goodness, there are a lot of Fleamen riders out here, like an unavoidable amount of them. They're fast and persistent, and they do a not insignificant amount of damage too. I die. Unless I can get through here by potion spam, I will absolutely have to kill them. I know I keep saying that every time an enemy appears to be unavoidable, but this time I mean it. I mean, look at how many there are, and they're so aggressive with their homing too. I tested their movement patterns with this one fleaman by itself and wondered if I could get all of them at once to circle me like this, but I figured there was no chance of that happening smoothly. They carried me to the left. I tried the potion spam, got the leap stone, and made it pretty far back to the right before dying again. Maybe I need to use even the turkey here too, unless with much patience I can get them all to circle me and then inch my way forward. No, surely that's impossible. I tried a few more times and came to the conclusion that unless I went back to the Master Librarian and bought a stupid number of potions, it's just not possible to get through this bit to the leap stone without killing any fleamen. And maybe even once I do have more potions to tank hits, it's near impossible to control where I'm going because there are just so damn many of these things, and they're so fast and aggressive. I took a break once again to consider my options here. I knew I could visit the Master Librarian and farm cash for more potions, but that costs even more valuable time. Even though under normal circumstances the time limit is lenient, the clock is always ticking, and that makes me uncomfortable. Even being able to fast travel to near the long library, I have to go all the way in just to meet the librarian, farm that torch outside his room for cash, then go all the way back through the library, back to the leapstone, and upon getting the leapstone, going back to the library again to that high ledge I couldn't get to before. And then I remembered something. I had pointed out much earlier in the video that I wasn't going to explain the sub-weapons, but there is one in particular that would be vital to holding off the fleamen without killing them. The stopwatch. Unfortunately for me, though, it would waste roughly as much time just getting one. There's a stopwatch and a candle just a couple of rooms away from the clock room at the heart of the castle. There's probably one elsewhere and closer, but this was the only one I knew of for sure. The easiest path there would be to take the fast travel to the first area of the castle, go all the way back through the alchemy lab, then halfway through the marble gallery. Bleh. It felt like it would take longer than a visit to the Master Librarian, but at least I could be certain that the stopwatch would keep the fleamen out of my way, and was a much more sure thing than just tanking damage and getting knocked around helplessly. At least I hope so. I know that, in past games at least, the stopwatch doesn't affect every enemy. For all I know, these stupid fleamen could be immune to it. But it was something I needed to test. I couldn't just give up and kill them without considering every option. Plus, once I have the stopwatch, it's sure to be a boon for the rest of the game. So I somewhat reluctantly backtracked, went through the alchemy lab, into the marble gallery, past the clock room, and... oh no, the clock. It was already past that first marker. Was I already too late? Was I going too slowly and methodically? Did I accidentally leave the game running during one of my sessions and didn't notice, losing valuable time? I thought I was moving quick enough and I made sure to pause the game when I had to ignore those thoughts. I've come too far to accept defeat. I got the stopwatch, and only around then remembered I could have been blocking projectiles with my shield. Stupid me, I was so focused on finding the stopwatch. Bleh. I go back the way I came, and... oh no, I can't get up this ledge, it's too high up. I'm gonna have to take a new path back and hope it doesn't screw me over. Yes, I know it's an option to head towards the fast travel room at the outer wall, but I don't want to deal with the stone roses or diplocephalus enemies again, even if they're not that bad, and even though I now know how damage boosting works, and at this point, I think it works out to be longer anyway. I made it through the marble gallery's lower path, regrettably using both potions on the way. I went back to the save room when I realized that my note from earlier was wrong. There are indeed different enemies here from before. For instance, there used to be a skeleton at the bottom of this room, but now it's one of those zombie soldiers. Anyway, I went to the fast travel room so I could return to the castle keep, and finally get the leapstone. I hoped so strongly that the stopwatch would keep them at bay, but had a suspicion that it wouldn't just because these enemies are annoying. I can't believe that worked. I got the leapstone. I didn't expect the stopwatch to consume so many hearts, but I don't even care. That was awesome, and I'm keeping this thing. It's basically the only sub-weapon worth holding for this challenge, and one that's really worth having at that. I took the fast travel, and after farming for some hearts so I could use the stopwatch a few times, went back to the first area's save room, with the next thing on the agenda being a return trip to the long library, as I had mentioned a short bit ago. I get to that ledge I couldn't reach normally prior to having the leap stone, and the area ahead is full of armored fleamen who have improved mobility and, armed with axes, do a hefty bit of damage. I use the stopwatch to slip past them and come to the next quote-unquote boss, the Lesser Demon, who is reused later in the game as a standard enemy. He has this ability where he becomes invulnerable and summons enemies, and I have to be really careful because I quit the game, loaded my last save, and tried again. My second attempt went much better. I used the stopwatch to great effect and didn't kill any enemies but him this time. I walked to the left and... What the fuck was that about? I went to the right and back to the left, hoping to fix whatever the hell just happened. Fortunately it does, and I can progress. Never seen that happen before, though. No, you've gotta be kidding me. I can't get up there without the mist form? Come on. That's more time I have to waste backtracking out of the library, and I wonder if it's even doable without the stopwatch, since after a few unrecorded and failed attempts, I couldn't get down here without it. I accidentally discarded my footage of it, but I was able to juke the first few fleamen by baiting them into doing their high jump, and I damage boosted through the rest. I hated the fact that I had went all the way through the library's deeper section without any new upgrades to show for it, but I had already saved, and it was too late to undo it to save time, and I'm glad I got that glitch footage to show you too. Anyway, next on the to-do list is head towards the underground caverns so I can fight the next mandatory boss. I decide to head through the marble gallery. I figured that now that I have the leap stone, it may be easier to get over the Diplocephalus enemies and stone roses. Luckily, I was correct. Just ahead, I press the switch in the floor to open up the floor gates in this area, and I also take a moment to farm more hearts here before moving out. Just below one of the floor gates is the entrance to the underground caverns, and here's another save room, yay! To the left, a few lance enemies to get past and a bandana, which is better than the sunglasses, so I equip it. I go back to the save room already, just to top up on health before heading out again. I can remember just by looking at that geometry below that I can't get to the boss I was thinking of as soon as I had hoped. I go back to save again so I can take a break and look at a map of the game to plan my next course of action. I knew of a few items I still needed, but I couldn't recall the right order or how to even get to each of them. I knew the next thing I needed was the mist power to get the bat form, but I couldn't remember where to get it. And then it hit me. The clock room at the heart of the castle leads there. The left statue moves out of the way every other minute to open up a secret passageway. So once again, back through the marble gallery. So much wasted time. On every single playthrough of this game, I keep forgetting this bit. Thankfully, it didn't take much time at all to backtrack to the clock room, and the statue was already out of the way, so I could advance. We briefly passed through Olrox's quarters to get to the area I really wanted to visit, but not before grabbing a few goodies to the right through a breakable wall. And back to the left, here we are, the Colosseum. This area has the next mandatory item, and it also features one of my favorite songs in the game, so for at least one go of the song, unless there's something I really want to make note of, I'm just gonna shut up for a sec and let the gameplay and music do the talking. That's long enough, I guess. I go back up the stairs and to the right to the next cutscene where we encounter Richter Belmont, who calls this his castle, and he summons a Minotaur and Werewolf to do battle with us. The game is getting tougher, with these two having some team attacks where they work together, and with each hit doing no less than 20 damage to me. I tried to make it a priority to take out the Minotaur first. I perceived him as the bigger threat. Very shortly after I took him out, the Werewolf fell too. After this fight and the usual life up, heading to the right gets us the Form of Mist, and we can now pass through metal bars in grace. Thankfully, right before this boss fight, we were granted a library card, because that's exactly where we have to go next. It's time to pass through that grate just beyond where we fought the Lesser Demon, get the Soul of Bat, and now with the power of flight, we can go basically anywhere we couldn't before. Almost. Apparently Share Factory, the software I use to edit videos right now, can only export videos under 60 minutes long, so I'm going to have to split this project into 2 parts. Don't go away. I've finished the video editing process and part 2 should be out shortly if it isn't already by the time you see this. I'll make a playlist and leave a link to it in the description below. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. What do you think of this playthrough so far? Please leave a comment and consider liking the video and even subscribing. It would be a big help. Thanks again, and I'll see you in part 2.